All right, let's get into it. Today, we're playing detective and cracking a medical mystery that honestly affects millions of people. It's that nagging problem that often hides in plain sight, why you might be feeling so tired all the time.
So let's start with a question that I bet we've all asked ourselves at some point. Why am I always so tired? You know the feeling. You get what should be a full night's sleep, but you wake up feeling like you haven't slept at all. And here's the thing. This isn't just in your head. It's a real, actual medical symptom. In fact, what doctors call excessive daytime sleepiness is the absolute #1 clue that something might be up with your sleep. It's the first big piece of evidence in our investigation.
So, this is where our investigation really kicks off. We're going to frame this feeling of sleepiness as the central problem we need to solve. Because, let's be real, it's way more than just being a little tired. It can mess with every single part of your day.
So, what do the doctors call these kinds of problems? Well, there's an official umbrella term for them: dyssomnias. It's basically a catch all for any condition where actually falling asleep, or more importantly, staying asleep, is a real struggle.
Okay, so like any good detective, the first thing we need to do is look for clues. What are the common warning signs? What are the risk factors that make a doctor's ears perk up when a patient says they're always exhausted? Well, here are some of the biggest ones. You've got things like snoring, which can be a sign that your airway is getting blocked. Then there are morning headaches and high blood pressure. And some other major risk factors, things like obesity, especially a larger neck size, being male, and being over the age of 50. You see how these clues start to build a case?
Now, to get a bit more scientific, doctors use some really specific screening tools. The Epworth Sleepiness Scale, for example, is just a simple way to put a number on how sleepy you actually are. And then there are questionnaires like STOP-BANG, which is an acronym designed to quickly calculate your risk for a very specific condition called obstructive sleep apnea. So once those initial clues point to a problem, the investigation gets a lot more serious. This is where we move into the forensic stage, you could say. We need specialized overnight tests to get the hard evidence. You can think of the whole process like a diagnostic funnel. It starts out really wide with those screening questionnaires we just talked about. If you seem to be at high risk, the funnel narrows to the next step, which might be an at-home portable monitor. And to get the most definitive answer, you go to the very bottom of the funnel, the gold standard test, called a polysomnography, or PSG.
So let's compare those two main tests. On one hand, you've got the gold standard PSG. This is the full-on, in-a-lab experience, with a technician monitoring you all night. It's incredibly detailed. It can even tell you which stage of sleep you're in. On the other hand, you've got the portable monitor. Super convenient, right? You do it in your own bed, but there's a trade-off. It measures fewer things, it can't track your sleep stages, and it's generally not for people who have other major health problems. And there's one more even simpler option called overnight oximetry. You just clip a little sensor to your finger and it measures if your blood oxygen level drops during the night. The big catch here, it can tell you that something is wrong, but it has no way of telling you why it's happening. It can't identify the cause. So after all that digging, all the clues, all the tests, the evidence usually points to one of two main suspects. This is the big reveal, where we finally get to the heart of the matter: a condition called sleep apnea. And it turns out there are two main types. First, on the left, you have obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA. The best way to think about this is like a kink in a drinking straw. Your airway gets physically blocked, but your body keeps trying really hard to pull air through. Then, on the right, you have central sleep apnea, or CSA. This is totally different. It's a communication breakdown. The brain just forgets to send the signal to breathe. So all breathing effort just stops for a moment.
So, how do you know if you've officially crossed the line into a diagnosis? Well, it all comes down to this number. If you're having more than 5 of these abnormal breathing events every hour, sleep apnea is confirmed.
And from there, it's all about how often this is happening. That's what determines the severity. Having between 5 and 15 of these events an hour is considered mild. Bumping up to 15 to 30 events is moderate. And anything over 30 events an hour, that's diagnosed as severe. Okay, so the case is cracked. We've got a diagnosis, so now what? This brings us to the final chapter, closing the case by figuring out the best treatment plan. And this is super important. There's no single magic bullet here. Finding the right treatment isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. It's a team effort, a conversation between you and your doctor to figure out what's really going to work for you. Now, for obstructive sleep apnea, that super common kink in the straw type, the number one go-to treatment is something called positive airway pressure, or PAP therapy. It's a machine that sends a gentle, steady stream of air through a mask to basically prop your airway open while you sleep.
But what if that's just not for you? Or what if it doesn't work? Well, don't worry, there are other options. You've got behavioral changes, like weight loss or exercise. There's positional therapy, which is really just about avoiding sleeping on your back. There are even special oral appliances, kind of like a mouth guard, that help pull your jaw forward. And in some situations, surgery can be an option too.
Now, for central sleep apnea, remember, that's the brain signaling problem, we have to think a little differently. Because it's often a side effect of another medical issue like heart failure, the very first step is to treat that underlying problem.
On top of treating the root cause, there are other tools in the toolbox for CSA. Different, more advanced types of PAP therapy can be used. Sometimes simply providing a little extra oxygen at night does the trick. And there are even some medications that can help stimulate and regulate your breathing.
And that brings our investigation to a close. We started with a simple question and ended up digging deep into diagnosis and treatment. So we'll leave you with one final thought to ponder. Is your fatigue just fatigue? Or could it be the first clue to something much bigger?